G'day everyone, Dean here with another review for you. Today we're going to be looking at a new lens made by Nisi. Now this is a 15mm f4 and what they're calling a Sunstar lens. It comes in 4 different mounts for all mirrorless cameras. So you've got the Sony E mount, Canon RF mount, Nikon Z mount, and today, as I'm a Fuji shooter, I'll be reviewing the Fuji X mount version. Now, I've been shooting with this solidly, shooting landscapes for the last couple of months. So let's jump in and I will tell you all about this new lens made by Nisi. Okay, so before we start, I just want to let you know I'm creating a date stamp for this video. So if you want to jump to any particular section at any time, then you can do that via the description, or just bring your cursor down onto the timeline and just scrub along there to what section you want to have another look at. Okay, let's start off with specs. So this is a 15mm lens. Now on the other mounts that's full frame, but of course the Fuji is 1.5 crop, so this becomes equivalent to 22mm full frame. So it's still a nice wide angle lens, but certainly on the other cameras with this lens you're getting an ultra wide. Now as I said, it's f4, it comes in at 470 grams and it has a 72mm filter thread. So weight wise, it's a nice sort of chunky lens. It's all metal and all glass, so it's not what I would call a really heavy lens, but it's not a lightweight either. Just compared to the 10 to 24, it comes in at 410 grams. So it's a little bit heavier than that, but compared to the 16 to 55, the big red badge lens, which comes in at 1 kilo, it's certainly a lot lighter than that one. Now, as I said, there's a 72mm filter thread on the front there, so it's very easy to put filters on, and of course it's perfect for the 100mm V6 Nisi filter system if you want to use those. As far as glass goes, there's 12 different elements in 10 groups, and the front element also has some Nisi hardening coatings, which is really nice. It's the same coatings that they use on their filters, so it just gives you a bit more protection and a bit more weather resistant on the front there. Now this is a full manual focus lens. There's no autofocus with this one. There's also no contacts on the back, so there's no electronics at all in the whole lens. It's fully manual. And don't be put off by that. I really love full manual focus lenses for landscape work. It also means, an advantage of not having any electronics is that if you're in really adverse sort of wet weather, then there's less to go wrong with it. Let's talk about Sunstars. So Nisi are calling this a Sunstar lens, and what the claim is that you can shoot Sunstars at any aperture. And that is true. Normally you would have to stop right down to about f22 to create a Sunstar, but with this lens Nisi have been able to make it in a certain way, and that's the way they've made the aperture blades are flat instead of being slightly curved, and because of this we can create Sunstars at any aperture. Here's a shot that I took early one morning. This was shot at f8, and as you can see I got a really nice Sunstar from that. Let's talk build quality, which is always really important when buying a lens or any sort of product. Now, Nisi are mainly known for their filters, and I've been using and selling their filters for several years now, and I've always been really impressed by this company and the quality of the products that they put out. And this lens is no exception. I can't fault the build quality of this thing. It's solid metal and glass. There's no plastic there at all. Even even the hood is metal. I mean, how often do you find that? Where do you find a metal hood? No one does that nowadays. So Nisi have not scrimped or saved when producing this lens. Now, other things we need to look at are flare and distortion. So, look, I've tested this for flare and it's pretty much on par with anything else. You're always going to get some sort of flare when you point a camera into the sun. So I would say this is certainly no worse than anything else that I've used, and it's pretty much sort of what I would expect as far as flare goes. Now, distortion. So distortion's really important for me, especially when shooting landscapes or seascapes in particular with a flat horizon line. I need to keep that flat, and I've had lenses in the past that as soon as they go to the wide angle end, they start to turn that horizon into a bit of a wavy line. And you know, we have to remember that this is actually a 15mm lens, so it's very, very wide. And I would have expected a lot more distortion than there is. So I've tested this, and again, with a horizon line, so this is barrel distortion we're talking about. With a horizon line without any correction, it's pretty much bang on. I can't really see any there. So I was very, very happy with the results as far as that goes. As far as other distortion goes, I shot a bit of architecture with this, and it's to be expected. If you're going to shoot flat and sort of fairly parallel, then you'll get great results with straight edges, and buildings would be nice and straight. But as soon as you start to point up, you're going to get that perspective where it sort of tapers off. So it's pretty much to be expected on a lens this wide. So that's just something to be aware of. But I'd certainly say it's not worse than what I had thought. And again, the more important one for me is the barrel distortion, and that was absolutely minimal, so I was very happy with that. Now, the other thing I always check with any lens that I buy, and if I'm buying a lens, I'll find a technical review that covers this, and that's chromatic aberration. Because, well, first I'll just tell you what that is in case you're not sure what it is. Chromatic aberration, or it's also known as colour fringing. So it's when we have fine detail in our image, straight lines, and you'll get a colour on the edge of it. So it causes this colour fringing, and it can be different colours. There's ways of getting rid of it, but I've always found like in Photoshop, if you try and correct it, you basically push one colour out to remove it, but you may bring in a colour somewhere else. So it can be quite problematic, and as I said, I've had really good quality lenses in the past that have been quite bad and quite pronounced with chromatic aberration. So it's something that's very important to me. I don't want to have that in my images, and as I say, it can be a little bit problematic trying to remove it. In saying that, now a lot of camera manufacturers are actually building it into the camera itself. So within the software of the camera, you can set it to correct chromatic aberration, and Photoshop certainly is a lot better now than it was sort of 5 or 10 years ago as far as removing that chromatic aberration. But all of that aside, if we've got a lens where the manufacturer has made a lens that doesn't produce it, then I think that's brilliant. And I've tested this, and there is pretty much no chromatic aberration, no colour fringing at all. So again, I'm very happy with that, and well done, Nisi. Now I want to just quickly talk about sharpness. I don't want to get sort of bogged down in this, because we get a bit hung up about, we buy a lens that has to be sharp. Well, really, there's not too many lenses nowadays that aren't sharp, and if you're not getting sharp results, it's probably more technique than the lens itself. Saying that, I have tested it. I've tested across its aperture range, and as with all other lenses, it's really sharp in its middle range, sort of 5.6 f8, f11, which is perfect for shooting landscapes. And the softness does drop off just a little bit in the corners, not that much, down the other end at f4 and f16 to f22. So I would say this is as sharp as any other Fuji lens that I have, and there's certainly not an issue with sharpness at all. Now, a lot of my images that I shoot, I have a lot of foreground, so it's important for me that that lenses are sharp in the corners. And when I shoot this style of image, I've gone over some of the stuff that I've shot with this lens, and it's perfectly sharp in the immediate foreground and the corners. So as far as sharpness goes, I think it's great, and certainly well on par with anything else that's out there on the market. So this is a fully manual focus lens, so I just want to go through and quickly show you some different ways that you can manually focus. And I am actually going to do another video on this lens on how to use it. So that'll go into a lot more detail, how to set your Fuji camera up to accept this lens, how to get the most out of it, and I go into more detail on the different focus methods. So anyway, let me show you how to manually focus this. There's a few different ways. So first, just go into your menu system and then come across to the bar on the left, come down to autofocus, manual focus. So go into that setting onto the second page. Now this, by the way, is a Fuji X-T3, so it may be slightly different on Fuji X cameras, but you'll be roughly in the same spot. So we want to find manual focus assist, and we just go to the right there. So I have mine set on standard, and that'll just give you a standard viewfinder or standard live view screen. There is 3 other ways, so we can go to digital split image, and you've got a choice of monochrome or color, and I'll just show you what that looks like. So then when we have our picture up, we've got that square box in the middle. Now the other way is digital microprism, so that's that one there. And the third, which is probably the most common way, would be to use focus peaking. And with focus peaking, we can pick different colors and whether the peaking is at a high percent or a low percent. So here it is, red high. And yeah, as you can see, as we change the focus, different areas show up on the peaking. So how I have mine set is I just go to standard and I focus off the barrel. So on this barrel we have a aperture ring, so we can easily see what aperture we're on. So here we're on f8, and we've got our focus barrel here, and we've got a hyperfocal scale or depth of field scale built into the lens. So I simply use that, and again I've got a whole video on hyperfocal. If you're not familiar with it, then have a look at that video. I'll put a link here and one in the description. It's a really good technique to use for getting your focus right. We just set it. I'll just quickly show you how you do it. So here we're set on f8, and we've got 2 f-stop ranges on the barrel in the silver range. The line in the middle is where the lens is actually focused. So here you can see I've focused the lens at infinity. If I come back to here, I've focused the lens at 2 feet. So what we do is, if we're working on an aperture of f8 and we want everything in focus from our foreground right through to infinity, then on the right hand side of the f-stop scale we put infinity on f8. We just line those 2 up. Okay, and then we go across and look on the left hand side, that scale, and we find f8, and we come up and it'll tell us where our focus starts. So at f8 with this lens I can get everything in focus from roughly say 2.5 feet through to infinity. So that's pretty incredible. I mean, if I stop right down to f16, then I would set my infinity over here to f16, and we're like less than 1 feet. So you can shoot with this lens, you know, massive depth of field without having to do focus stacking or anything ridiculous like that. And I find this is the way I've always preferred to shoot, and this is another reason why I absolutely love manual focus prime lenses, because the prime lens will generally have the scale on here. A zoom lens won't. So it's my preferred way of focusing. It's just very quick and easy. I don't have to worry about it. I just set it off the scale and I know where it starts and where it finishes. Okay, and another way you can manually focus with this lens is on the back of the camera. You've got your back scroll wheel. So you get your composition all set and you pick your point that you want to place your focus on, that you want to focus the actual lens on, and we just push that scroll wheel in and that will magnify our view. We can magnify further by scrolling that wheel and get to that point where we want to focus on, and then we just focus the barrel. And we just get it so as it's pin sharp, and it's really, really easy to do. And if you happen to have a loop, then using a loop magnifies it and makes that even easier. So there you go. That's 4 different ways to manually focus this lens. And don't be put off by manual focus or be scared of manual focus. There's a lot of advantages in using manual focus over autofocus for landscape work. Okay, so I want to talk about what this lens is really good for. I mean, it's pretty obvious what it's not good for. It's not good for sport or for chasing little kids around, photographing them. But honestly, for landscape, seascape, architecture, real estate, I think this is a fantastic lens. So for those of you that follow me, you know that I'm a landscape photographer, and the majority of my work is seascapes. I've been shooting with this lens, as I said, for the last 2 months. It's really actually only come off the camera once to put a different lens on. The rest of the time it's been on there. I love the focal length. I just think for landscapes it's not too wide, it's wide enough, and it's certainly a focal length that I really, really enjoy. So how did this lens fare from a landscape point of view? Well, I think it was brilliant. I'll just run a few images here that you can have a look at, and I'm going to run a slideshow at the end. If you want to hang around till there, I'll have a lot more that you can just see what I've shot on this lens. But look, I just love the focal length for landscape work. I think it's just an ideal focal length. It's not too wide where everything gets thrown miles and miles away, but it's certainly wide enough. I think this one's 22mm full frame, and I just love anything around the 24 and a little bit under. I've had 28mm primes before, and I find for landscape work they're not quite wide enough, so I've always gone down to a 24. And then I have a 12mm Samyang, which is equivalent to 18mm, but I don't use that very often because I find it, for me, it's just a little bit too wide. And I do have the 10 to 24mm Fuji lens that I use if I need to go sort of super wide. But for 99% of my work, I've always shot at this focal length. When I was shooting Canon, I had a prime. It was actually a Zeiss lens, but that was 25mm. So yeah, I really love this lens, and I knew that I would because, as I said, I do really like that focal length. And I shot a few architectural shots with it. Just went into the city one day and shot a few buildings. They were all handheld, and I don't shoot a lot of that stuff, so I'm certainly not an expert in it, but I did enjoy this lens for that. And I just shot some interiors as well, just thinking, some real estate people may be looking at using a lens like this, and I know a lot of those guys like to have a prime lens for that work. So I shot a few of those, and I was pretty pleased with those. If you kept the camera level, then your walls and everything were nice and straight. And so these shots you're looking at here, there's no correction, no perspective correction done to these at all. Okay, so I just want to finish up. I have to say, overall, I really love what Nisi have done here. It's the first time they've ever made a lens. I was pretty surprised when I heard that they had made a lens, and I think they've done a brilliant job. It's built beautifully. It works really nicely. It matches in with the Fuji camera exceptionally well, with the the old school style aperture, marked aperture ring, and the depth of field scale, the full manual focus. So I think from that point of view, it really blends nicely with the Fuji camera. But I also want to talk just briefly to you about why you should have a prime lens. And I'm a big advocate for this, and I teach it a lot in my workshops, maybe more for people that are a little bit more advanced. So once you get to a stage where you're pretty happy with the way you're shooting, then, and you've got all the technical stuff on board, then a great way to really improve your skill and more your vision of what you see and how you see is to shoot with a prime lens. And I found this out by accident when I bought that Zeiss 25mm lens with my Canon system. I just used it all the time, and then after a while I found that I was starting to see in that focal length, and my compositions came a hell of a lot faster, and I could basically see something and then just plonk my tripod and set the camera up, and I was pretty much in the right spot, 99% of the time. So if you do want to advance your vision in that way, I think a prime lens is a really good way to go. And as far as if you are going to have a prime lens, then certainly if I was only allowed to have one prime lens for landscape work, it would be around the 24mm focal length. So, this one's 22, it's a fraction wider, but it's bang on. So there you go, that's my review of this new lens by Nisi. I think they've done a fantastic job. Thanks for watching. Hang around for the slideshow if you want to see some images that I've shot. If not, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys, ciao.